Hi everyone, and welcome back to Coachy TV. In this video, we're going to talk about tracking growth with VO2 max and how that progress really does matter. And what we're going to do is we're going to look specifically at tracking VO2 max, why it's important to do the regular VO2 max test or checks, whatever you want to call them, regularly to track aerobic growth in these distance and middle distance races, but also how you can kind of predict not only you're seeing that growth, what your athlete, either yourself or your teammate you're coaching, what they could potentially do in various race distances. So specifically, what does VO2 max growth mean for other races, such as cross-country 5K and the track mile are the ones we're going to be looking at here. Obviously, it directly shows you what 2-mile potential is, because that's the best test, is 2 miles best effort. And then also, what other takeaways can we take from growth based on the individual athletes, the differences that make them up, their different levels of training, things like that, what we can actually take away from it. The picture you're seeing here is our 2020 Wharton Boys varsity cross-country team to start the season from their latest VO2 max test. We've got about 15 kids who are out there, and these were the top 7, and we said this was the one where we were going to set the varsity lineup. Fortunately, in our state of Florida, they just voted a few days ago that we're allowed to start our season on August 25th with races to start Labor Day weekend. So we may have another VO2 max check somewhere in there, but these are our varsity top 7 for the start of the season, starting with our number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from this VO2 max check. I said following the last VO2 max check, which is 2 miles best effort, which I'm going to be showing as we go through this. For me, this is going to change on a day in, day out basis, or a race in, race out basis, I should say. But this is the team that we're going to use to start the season. Let's get right to it. I am Kyle Giacono, the head boys cross country and track coach at Wharton High School in Tampa, Florida, and I have been for the last 7 years. If you like a closer look at some of my credentials, they are on the screen.
And so why you can even do this is the idea that there's an energy continuum. The idea that different races supply different amounts of energy from the aerobic system, the anaerobic glycolytic system, and the alactic system. And when you know that and kind of know the associations, you can get an idea of what somebody can do in one race based on what they can do in other race distances. And VO2 max, 2 miles best effort, is one of the absolute best ways that you can do that. So this is from the USATF USA Track and Field Distance Curriculum for coaches, and what it's based on is everything is based on percentage of a VO2 max. So right here, or 2 mile pace. So fastest aerobic pace, that's why it's at 100%. Okay, if you're going to go to a race like the 1500 meter or the 1600 meter, which I said we were going to talk about in this one, or the mile, you will see that it's obviously run at a faster intensity because it is shorter. It gets more of the energy from the anaerobic glycolytic system, and it gets less of the energy from the aerobic system than you would see in, say, the 2 mile. And you would see that it's about 110 to 112% of most people. So we're going to have to come up with some kind of variation for that to figure it out. So I say 111%. We'll get into that a little bit when we get a little bit further into this. We also can see that the 5K is run at 97% of VO2 max. So obviously a little bit slower. It's a longer race, 3.1 miles versus 2 miles, which is the best test for this. Obviously, the closer to whatever your indicator is, the more accurate it's going to be when you use one thing to predict something else. So you can predict your 3K very accurately from a 2 mile or VO2 max test or check. You can predict a 5K pretty accurately, a track 5K very accurately, but obviously we're dealing with cross country, so there's a couple other things that you want to deal with. The 10K, if you're doing it on a track, it's going to be a little bit better than if you're doing it on like a cross country 10K, but you're starting to get further away, so it might be a little bit less accurate of predictor, and it's probably not at all appropriate for predicting a marathon performance, just because there's so many different variables. If we would actually look at this, lactic threshold would be 15K pace, and it might be okay to use it as a somewhat an idea of 15K performance, but it's obviously better for things like 5K. And then the 1500 meter is close enough to where you can get a pretty decent idea of where it is. Now, if you're a middle distance coach looking at this, you're saying, well, can I do that for the 800 meter too? Not really. The reason being is, and this is sort of oversimplistic to say 120% is what you run your 800 meter at versus your 2 mile. It's actually more like 136 to 120. It's a much bigger range than this chart, which is a little bit old and does need to be updated just a little bit, would say. And the reason being is you have more distance people that are running down in the 800. They're going to be running at a closer to their VO2 max than somebody that's like a 400 meter person moving up, would be more like 136%. This would be like David Rudisha when he set the world record, much more of a sprint-based person going super, super fast. Now, for high school athletes, because it takes more time, it's a slower race pace, it's going to be closer to 120%. Also, if you're dealing with, say, high school girls, it's going to be even closer to this because they're going to be, obviously, even the best ones in the world are not going to be as fast as the best high school boys in the world, just based on the time that they're in the zone. The longer the race, the more the aerobic system is supplying the energy. So I wouldn't even try to look at it. I've not seen any good predictors for 800-meter success based on VO2 max, which we're going to look at here. There are some other things that you can do that I can suggest. Maybe you seek out a little bit more information. We're dealing just with here, since I'm getting ready for our cross-country season, I'm doing a lot of VO2 max stuff, and I thought it'd be really appropriate to see how you can do it based on VO2 max. So let's go ahead and get go a little bit further. All right, and some notes about conversions before I start to show you how my team has progressed over the last 2 VO2 max checks and what I can take away from that. So what exactly can these conversions in VO2 max growth actually tell you? Well, they can't tell you exactly what somebody's going to run in a race. Obviously, there are just so many variables. There are just way too many variables to have any guarantee in anything like this. So the idea being is variations in courses if you're dealing with the cross-country 5K or another cross-country distance. Variation in course is a big deal. You deal with one that's got a lot of hard surface, maybe it's on a school campus, is going to obviously be much faster than if you go to a place that's got a ton of hills, long grass, poor conditions, so it's been chewed up throughout. Maybe it's the last race of the day or something. That's a huge variation. Environmental factors. Here in Tampa, Florida, where we're coming to you from, we're not going to see 60 degrees probably for another 3 months, so it's just going to be very, very hot in everything that we're doing. Conversely, if you're somewhere up north at the end of the season, a very, very cold day might play an issue with it, and just other environmental factors, so you obviously can't have a guarantee there. Competition, good competition can definitely help you. Poor competition, idiots going out way too fast, that might draw you out of your race strategy if you're still getting used to racing. Competition has a big deal with this. And just race strategy overall, and the athlete on that day, maybe they got really bad news about an SAT score or something like that, or maybe they're just feeling really, really good and they take it out with bad race strategy too early. There's just it cannot tell you exactly what somebody is going to do in a race. But what can it tell us is what their current fitness level is versus the metrics. So the idea of different races take different parts of energy supplies, and we could say, in a perfect world, if you do things correctly, what would you potentially be capable of based on that test, right? So this directly impacts their potential in a particular race distance at that current time, right? So, and obviously your check is not going to be the day of it, so there's going to be fluctuation. They maybe got a little bit more fit or even less fit depending on what happened, along with these other variations, but it just can tell you their fitness level and then their potential in particular race distances. Based on what you're using as your conversion, it might be better. VO2 max is great for 5K predictor. It's great for 3K predictor. It's very, very good for mile predictor. You start getting further out from that, and you might want to look at a different type of predictor to do these conversions. Races run at a certain percentage of VO2 max, and other metrics like things like fly 30, 400 meter time can also give some insights into this. And last thing before I take you through what my team has been doing in the last little bit, there are several indicator workouts that you might be able to do that might give you things like 800 meter predictor or a 1500 or 15K predictor or 10K predictor or something like that. So one of them is called the Coachy test. I would definitely recommend look at Coachy test. I always say that wrong. Basically, it's really good for your middle distance races, your 800, your 1600 meter mile. It's a little bit more on the anaerobic glycolytic system, so I would not do that test in cross country, but in the track season, I have done it and will probably continue to do it. There's also things called, and that basically involves doing 60 seconds as fast as you can go, give a certain amount of rest, and the rest gets cut as you go forward. You take the total amount. There's a whole conversion there. Again, look for that. You'll find charts for it, I guarantee you. There's other indicator workouts that I've seen. I really like one that is it's 6 times 400 meters, and if they can hit a certain target for all of them with 3 minutes rest, and they're ready for some races like potentials in the 1600 meter and the 3200 meters. So it's kind of going the other way. Those are ones that are both based on more anaerobic glycolytic acid buffering capacity. The aerobic system obviously also has to be able to get all the way through it. There's also something that's called a critical velocity test, which basically involves going 30 minutes as fast as you can possibly go, or as far as you can go in 30 minutes, and not kicking at the end, being kind of consistent all the way through it. That can help you with longer race predictors like the 10K, 15K. I don't know if it really is effective for like the half marathon and the marathon, but it's more for the longer end. So if you want more information on that, Cosmean test, indicator 400-meter workout, and critical velocity test, I would recommend looking those. But for me, I best like current VO2 max, or the velocity or the pace at which somebody reaches VO2 max, or fastest aerobic pace, for this, as it's what contributes most of the energy for these races, right? Even the 800, I suppose there might be a metric that I haven't looked at for VO2 max that can give you a decent idea. I just haven't found a great one for 800 because there's just so much variation, so I don't like it. But it is still more aerobic than anything else, so I'm sure there's something like that out there. But for me, as a high school coach, I'm dealing more with 1,600 meters with the group I'm working with, to 3,200 meters to 5K. So for me, VO2 max being right in the middle of a lot of that is why I really like it, and also because it contributes the most energy to the races. So let's see how my team has done and some of the takeaways that I took away from the last few checks, and what I can say from those with the predictors conversions. Alright, so as I've mentioned, I'm a big advocate of doing VO2 max tests fairly regularly. The one that you're seeing here is one that was done on July 13th. It was the fourth one that we did of the summer, so we are doing it fairly regularly as we're doing it, and here are the actual results. I also had some new runners come in, and we did a mile test with them because they were brand new on 7/27, and I'll show you how to do that one specifically if you feel that's appropriate for them. And it's got their VO2 max right here. So there are two websites that can kind of make your life a little bit easier. One is just, if you go into if you just type pace calculator, the one for active.com is fairly decent. And then I also use, if you type in time percentage calculator, this one right here, I don't even know how to pronounce that, but if you go in here, it'll tell you if you give time 1, it'll give you the percentage of time 2. And obviously you can go through and figure out exactly what that is based on doing the seconds and things like that, but this will make it a whole lot faster as you're doing it. So what I found is, with our top 2 runners here, and I'll do it with the ones that are highlighted in yellow here, our top boys, top girls, and some brand new runners who are out here, just to kind of show you where this kind of can tell you. So Jared ran 10:02 and Thomas ran 10:29 on this day. That's a VO2 max of 5:01 and 5:14. So starting here with Jared, what you want to know is, as we said, the 5K is run at 97% of VO2 max. So it's run obviously a little bit slower because it's a longer distance. So if you're in this one here and you go 5:01, because that's the average per mile going 10:02, and you put in this last one here, 97, you'll get 5:10. Okay, so obviously it's a slower time. So it's at 5:10, as I said, 5K conversion. So this would be like a track conversion, is 5:10 pace. If you go into a pace calculator, and there's tons of good ones for this, and put 5:10 in for 5 kilometers, you will get a race time of 16:03. But that's for a track, and obviously a track is going to be run faster than you would do this on a course. So the standard conversion for, say, a fair cross-country course, not the hardest course you do all year, not the one that's got a mile worth of hard surface because it's on a school campus, is to add 40 seconds to it. So I could say with some reasonable certainty, Jared at this point of the summer was in shape to run 16:43 in a cross-country 5K. Okay, doesn't mean he's going to do that, but that's the kind of shape he's showing based on this VO2 max test. Now, how am I getting this mile time of 4:11? Well, we're going to go back to that idea of 111% is what you would run your track mile in. And so if we go back here and we still have the VO2 max of 5:01, and we get rid of these numbers, we're going to now type 111. Again, you could go 110, you could go 112. It's right in the middle, so that's why I do this, and I get 4:31. And there's no conversion because this was done for us on a track, this test. So there's no conversion. If you did it another way, it might be a little bit more less accurate to predict this, but might be a little bit more accurate to predict this because you're not doing the 40 seconds. But that's how I came up with those numbers, and that is right on what his PR was from his sophomore year. We never really got to do a lot of this last track season because the world went crazy. Just to do this again, so Thomas 10:29, that is 5:14. I usually round it down in that case, and then if I were to go and change that for him, which is 5:14, we're going to go and actually let's do the track one for him first since I've got the numbers in. 442, 442. That's how you could end up doing it that way. You could also go in and you could figure out how many seconds are in this. So if you said that you go 5 times 60 plus 14 to get the number of seconds in 514, and then you went through and you divided, that number ends up being 314. If you divide it by 1.11, because that's 111%, you get 282 seconds. Anything that 300 seconds is 5 flat, so 282 is going to be 42, right? Because 82 is going to be what is that, 15, 16, 17, 18 seconds less than 5 minutes. So that's how you could do it also if you had a calculator. That's why this is a whole lot nicer, because I just went through and did a whole bunch of numbers, and I could just let this plug it in there for you. So 442, which would be a PR for Thomas for his career also, which that tells me, oh, that's really great. At this point in the summer, they're potentially showing that they could run PRs in their miles without doing any anaerobic glycolytic work. That is great. Let's go ahead and look at what his potential might look like and how I got those numbers for the 5K. 97, 523, which is what I have right here. If you were to go into the same pace calculator and go 523 for 5 kilometers, you'll get the number of 1644, which is what I had right here. Add the 40 seconds to make it the standard conversion to a course, and we have 1724. That's how I ended up doing it, okay? I'm not going to do the math on some of these other ones, because hopefully that was easily explained in those first 2 examples, how I came up with this. So if I look at my next runner on here, we've got a young man named David, who's never run a cross-country 5K before, which will be important for the next aspect we look at. He ran 11:49, which actually he ran faster the time previous, so I kept his VO2 max of 550. You convert that, 97% is 6 flat, and 18:38 on the track, which becomes a 19:18 in a cross-country 5K, and a 5:15 in the mile. His PR is 5:07 or 5:08, I can't remember from last track season offhand. But obviously, that shows sort of the difference here between somebody who's in the 10s and somebody that's in the 11s here at this point of the season. We'll talk about some of our top girl runners here. Brooke ran 12:35, which is 6:17 VO2 max. The conversion, 97%, is a race pace on the track of 6:28, which would be 20:05. Add the 40 seconds for cross country, makes it 20:45, and a mile of 5:39. Alex, one of our other top girls, these two trade off. They're very close to each other. Ran 13:13, just like David. She ran better the last time out for whatever reason, so I kept her at 6:25. If you look at this conversion, 6:36, that's a 20:30, which would be a cross country of 21:10, 5:46 in the mile, back in the middle of July. I also want to point out some of the more mid-tier girls here, just like David's sort of like in the middle of our boys. He's our number 3 right now. Lexi ran 14:08. That's a 7:04 VO2 max. You do the conversion of 7:17 on a track of 22:38. In cross country, that would be on a course about 23:18, 6:21 mile. And then lastly here with Dana, we've got a 7:50, which equates to a race pace of 8:04 on the track, 25:04. That would be a cross-country converted of 25:44, and a mile of about 7:03. Now, how did I do this here with the mile? Well, you kind of do it backwards for what I was just saying you do with the percentage of VO2 max. So these were young ladies who just joined us. I didn't want to throw them in a 2-mile just yet. I didn't think they were quite ready for it. So they went out and they ran their mile at 7:52 and 8:16. So we'll do we'll look at Ryan's time first. She was, clear all this out. She was 7:52. If we say that we go 110%, actually I need to do it the other way. It has to be in number 2 here, 111%. So to figure out 100% of what that would be, that's how we get 843.92, which I rounded up to 844 because it's so close. As you're doing it, if you go through and do the conversions we did before, that would be 9 flat race pace on a track, 27:58, which would be 28:38 on an actual cross-country course. And then if you were to look at a mile, it would be 7:52 because that's what they did. Same thing here, 8:16 for Eliza. If we went and we looked at that 8:16 for Eliza. We'll do the same thing. We get 9:10, which is where, actually, I don't know why I had it at 9:09. That's weird. But it's going to end up being basically the same thing. But 9:10, as you're doing it, that's 9:25 if you convert it to the 97%. 29:15, a 29:55 conversion to a cross country. And again, 8:16 as you're doing it. So, all right, so that tells you where they were. And then we came back and we did this just this week, about 3.5 weeks longer. And what can we actually say from the progress, as I go and make this full screen, from one to the other? So, top two boys, I'll go through the same ones that we kind of just looked at here with Jared. Jared was 10:01, so he actually did not, he dropped a second because, again, I rounded down. So he only went to 5:09 race pace, 16 flat in the conversion, 16:40, and now 5:30 in the mile. This last column is what they were at that last tab that we were just looking at. So this is the previous time of 16:43 and 4:31. So didn't really drop much in 3.5 weeks. Thomas got basically the same. He was a second faster, just like Jared, but I didn't round it down because I rounded it down last time, so there's no change here with him. David had a massive drop of 11:17, which is 5:37 on average. It's a drop of 13 seconds, which is, you double it for his actual time from the last time, because this is per mile of a 2 mile. And if we look at it this time, that means that he would race pace at 5:47 on a track, which is 17:58. You go to a cross-country conversion, and again, this is about, say, a month before our first meet is going to be, of 18:38 for somebody who's never run a cross-country 5K before, has never run anything besides track before, and a mile of 5:03. This would be his PR, suggesting, based on these metrics, that David could PR in his mile, even though we've just been working aerobic stuff. Same thing, I think I mentioned that Jared, his PR, but it's from his sophomore year, but that is technically a PR for him too, if he were to run that. So, really great growth here from David in these, 3.5 weeks. 19:18 predictor down to 18:38. That's great. I would love to see that on a month-by-month basis. It means, potentially in the 17s or something like that if he continues to grow at this level by the first meet. Let's take a look at Brooke here, the first young lady I showed you last time. She ran 12:27 this last time out, which is 16:14, so she dropped 8 seconds from the last time. If we look at that converted, it is 6:25, or a track 5K of 19:56. You add the 40 seconds, and we have 20:36, and a mile of 5:36. Pretty nice growth from one to the next, and I'll put in the video down below the actual workout from this, the VO2 max check. She got a little bit out of herself, just because some of the boys, as I mentioned, were racing for varsity spots. I think this actually could be updated in the next week or so, and would show that she could be even faster. Alex ran basically the same time. It ends up being the same based on rounding it. So we get the exact same numbers here. This would be a PR for Alex in both the cross-country 5K and the mile. So again, just like David is suggesting, this would be a PR because he's never done it. So double PRs here. Our number 1 or 2 girl, depending on the day, is showing that she could potentially PR in the mile and the cross-country 5K here, at the middle of August, which is fantastic. Let's take a look at Lexi. She went down to 13:40, which is 6:50 pace, dropping 28 seconds from the 2 mile last time out. So now it's suggesting that she could run a track 5K at a pace of 7:02, which is 21:51, or a cross country of 22:31 when you add on the extra 40 seconds. This would be a PR for this young lady. And a 6:09, her PR in the mile is 6:03. So again, it's suggesting that these kids are getting into the shape where they ended last track season, or better than the cross-country season previous with their PRs already, and we're in August. So that should give some really good indicator of doing some right things with them based on these metrics and conversions. And again, these are not perfect. Dana, 14:36. Which was 7:18, so she dropped more than a minute from the last test. So now 7:31 on a track 5K, 23:21, or 24:01 in a cross-country 5K, which would be her PR. 6:34, her PR in the mile is 6:24, so not far off her PR. The 2 young ladies who joined us a little bit later, this time they went out and they did, actually it was a 10-minute test, which is also a really good indicator, and her average pace, Ryan, was 7:48, which was drop of like 2 minutes, a little bit less than 2 minutes from the last time when we did the mile conversion. The mile conversion is not the best way of doing it, but it's a starting point. That suggests that cross-country 5K on the track, she could go 8:02 or 24:58. Cross-country actual 5K, 25:38 if you do the 40 seconds, which would be a PR for her. And 7:01, she's never, the only mile she ever ran was the one when she did the test the week before. And then Eliza, 8:12 in the 10-minute pace based on average. Again, almost cut 2 minutes there from the time before. 8:27 on a track for a 5K, 26:15 or 26:55, which would be like a 3-minute PR in terms of cross-country conversion. And 7:23 would also be her mile PR. So, some interesting things to take away. So my major takeaways from the last 2 checks that I just kind of walked you through and some of the things we talked about before. The group is really progressing very nicely. I'm very happy with what I saw from the last, between these last 2 checks as we start getting a little bit closer to racing here in the next maybe month or so. The average time drop between the 2, if I go and I look back at all the kids who ran both tests, the one from the middle of July and the one from what we just showed you on the 10th of August, between the 2, the average drop was 30.5 seconds in the 2 mile. Okay, so 30.5 seconds. So those girls that did the 10 minutes, I also accounted those in terms of the actual drops in their average their time. So basically, I doubled theirs as they were looking at it, because if they were to progress to it, it would be the same thing. So 30.5 seconds. That means they can aerobically run, meaning the mile pace of that is 15.25 seconds faster than they could during the previous check. That means they can run aerobically, 15.25 seconds faster, because that's half of what the test actually indicates here. So in other words, their theoretical 5K race pace has dropped by about 45 seconds on average from the group. Why is that? Aerobic pace here, fastest aerobic pace has gotten 15 seconds faster per mile. This is longer than the 5K. You do the conversion, obviously, as you're going through it for the 97%, but theoretically, that's about 45 seconds on average drop between the last 2. I'll take that every single time between one test and another. Now, some of these kids are suggesting they can PR right now in both the cross-country 5Ks and their theoretical mile times without any glycolytic work. We've not started that. Specific prep for us did start this week, so we are going to start doing this here. It's the week after the test that I just showed you. But before any glycolytic work, they're showing that they can not only PR in these longer cross-country races, the 5K, but also their mile and track. So their aerobic system is really, really strong. And if I had gone through everybody that was on that chart, you would see that would have happened all the way across the board, not just some of those other ones as you are looking at it. So with the biggest jumps are coming from the less experienced runners, and that's sort of an important thing. Those ones that I kind of showed you had just jumped in. Some more of those mid-tier runners that we're talking about, the middle, the meat of your team that maybe hasn't been running as long. However, the top 2, and actually let me back up on that. So kids like David, or number 3 that I was showing you, who dropped a huge amount of time, basically almost a minute in his theoretical 5K. The 2 girls that did the 10-minute test, Ryan and Eliza, dropped almost 2 minutes on that. Dana, the young lady who I mentioned, dropped more than a minute as they were doing it. So that sort of that meat, that middle of the roster, and especially those ones who are brand new, showed the biggest jumps. The top 2 boys did stay almost the same between the 2. Okay, 2 things to look at that. There's no reason to panic, because here's why. These 2 are 4-year runners with lots of experience. They've been running for a while. Both of them actually had a little bit of experience with other sports like soccer and a little bit of running before they came to me. Not a lot, but a little bit. They'd run a 5K here and there and that kind of thing. And they've been with me for all this time. So they will likely need more time to show growth. Their growth's going to be a little bit slower, basically. In addition, especially when we're dealing with top 2 boys, those top girls that I showed you did progress. Why would that be when the top boys are not, when they're doing virtually the same sort of work and the same kind of the same sort of mentality as we're looking at it? These kids with this need outside competition. They're likely going to need this because, as you saw, Jared is way out in front, Thomas is way out in second. David does have a pretty big group in between, a decent amount between his 11:15 and the next kids that went 11:50 on their 2-mile test. So these kids that are way out by themselves, though, are likely to need outside competition to really get pushed to new levels, much ahead of the rest of the group. This is why these top two, when we go out and we do a race, I'm definitely going to try and reset their VO2 max from races, because let's face it, you can tell people to run their absolute best effort, but you're going to run faster when you have somebody next to you in another jersey who you want to beat for your team. So that's the other reason why with these kids who've been at it for a long time, Jared's a 15-minute runner from the year before, top 10 in the state. Thomas is a 16-minute runner from the year before. These kids will be there when the competition, they just need that a little bit more. I suppose we could jump on a bike and try and do something like that with them, but it's just not the same thing. So there's no need to panic. If you've got boys that are kind of at the top that are separated, not two boys that are next to each other that can push each other in practice, but two boys that are kind of separated the way that I showed you that they were in this, that's when this kind of comes to mind with me, why they might need that outside competition. And wrapping this up, given they haven't raced any other teams in 5 months, this gives me great anticipation in a good way for what they can do when they do race against teams in about 3 weeks, right? So not only these top boys, but all these other kids that are making these huge gains, these big gains on a week in, week out basis. I'm really excited. Anticipating, meaning I really want to see it, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, definitely, in 3 weeks when this happens, that they can show even more, because they've just been going against themselves in practice and things like that for a very long time now. The weirdest setup of a season that anybody's had. We've been allowed to work with them since June 15th, so, June to July to August, about 2 months they've just been doing it with themselves, but they've had all that non-competition beforehand. From March 13th is when our school year got shut down here in Florida. So it's this idea of, I think that's going to even show greater progress. And when we get to actual races, I'll do a presentation like this that shows how you can do it from the 5K and kind of backward convert it to get your VO2 max times in that same way, so that you can reset numbers as they show improved fitness. So if you like this video, please think about liking or subscribing. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments down below. I'll put that VO2 max check, the second one. I'll put both of them actually in there now that I think about it, so you can see how they actually played out. I mentioned a couple things in there if you'd like to look at those. And until next time, this has been Coachy TV.